what I want to do is to sort of set out a vision for what we're calling a blueprint for healthy longevity for all, and really to achieve the new longevity dividend. I think there are probably some differences in how we see and measure the longevity dividend, but hopefully by the end of my talk, and I know that will probably come up in the panel discussion afterwards. But essentially, I'm working on this with in my new role, actually, which I perhaps should mention, which is as Healthy Longevity Champion for the National Innovation Centre for Aging based in Newcastle. So I'm going to speak a little bit to some of the work that they're doing, but we're literally pulling together a blueprint for Healthy Longevity Innovation Mission, which essentially ties together all the work that I've been really involved in for the last 3 to 4 years, wearing all the different hats that you mentioned earlier. So I'll start off by saying, the general trend is of course, is that we're living longer, but life expectancy, as we know, has begun to stagnate in the UK and is actually falling in the USA. So let's just have a little bit of a reality sort of check here. In the UK, we spend about a fifth of our lives in very poor health. And the poorer you are, the greater the proportion of your life is spent in poor health. So we must close this gap of an almost 20-year difference in healthy life expectancy between the richest and poorest. So this is actually the burning platform at the moment for policymakers in the UK. Now, Dylan, I think, mentioned the All-Party Parliamentary Group and how we have a goal that we set for 5 extra years of healthy life expectancy while minimizing health and well-being inequalities. So that's been a goal that has been recommitted to in the policy agenda. We've got a bit of a hiatus at the moment. We've got a new PM that will be announced, new Prime Minister that will be announced on the 5th of September. But our Levelling Up policy paper to level up inequalities across the nation was published in February. And that goal, the 5 extra years of healthy life expectancy while minimizing health and well-being inequalities, has been recommitted to. So that has been the North Star for all the activities that I have been involved with. And of course, that government commitment behind this goal has been absolutely crucial. And I know Dylan had mentioned as one of the key learnings for the work that you are doing in the US now to get it up the policy agenda. So we need to shift sick care to a new model. So we need a new paradigm shift, and we need to get to a place where we're healthier for longer. So how do we do that? Now, compressing morbidity, of course, is still a challenge. But as we're seeing with all the wonderful work on the biology of aging, there are common pathways in chronic diseases that lead to multiple morbidities and we can manipulate and influence. Of course, really good to see that National Geographic video, which I saw actually, I think 2 years ago, just before COVID struck in Singapore, when I saw that video. And it's really heartening to see how the FDA have really sort of made huge strides and sort of seen the opportunities here. Now, the pandemic has really been helpful to highlight, this neuroscience approach that, targeting aging processes to prevent multimorbidity is obviously an important element to improve health span and compress morbidity. And I know Neera has been doing fascinating work with the supercentenarians there. Now, in the UK, which is where, of course, I'm based, the Life Sciences Vision was published last year, and it outlines 7 critical missions that government, industry, the NHS, which is our National Health Service, academia, etc., and research charities need to get behind, and to address aging at its root, and also tackle the big killers like dementia, for example, which I know is the focus of NIH funding at the moment. Now, it was the first time actually in the Life Sciences Vision that the science of aging was actually deemed a priority. So it showed that actually the policymakers are starting to really get this. And of course, it's not surprising. We've seen a huge wave of breakthroughs, biological breakthroughs, omics research, hallmarks of aging that's been mentioned a few times, and better understanding biological systems, generally. And we've got all the new tools, next generation sequencings, etc., that we can analyze colossal amounts of data about biological systems. And of course, I'm fascinated that with my interest in AI. And of course, we've seen this whole explosion in modeling technologies, deep learning frameworks, natural language processing models, etc. We've got new biotechs like in silico medicine and others like that who have been really pioneering the way in AI-driven systems to analyze biological data at scale and doing pioneering work in aging biomarkers and aging clocks, for example. So we know that biomarkers of aging can accurately quantify the human aging process. And we've heard a little bit about that already today, all this fascinating work that's happening there. And of course, we have amazing stuff that's happening. Just last week, DeepMind said that its AlphaFold tool can successfully predict the structure of nearly all proteins known to science. And it's actually offering this database of over 200 million proteins to anyone for free. Now, for free, yes, we need to democratize, access to the benefits of longevity. And that's the heart of actually what drives me and gets me out of bed every morning. And, there are many, many interesting, technologies like the Humanity app. Of course, Peter Ward and Michael Greer were on Lifespan a little while ago. I was on the panel with them. I know them well. And last week we had other apps by Rejuve.ai. They've got a longevity app that gives users full control over their health data as part of its mission to democratize access and advance longevity science breakthroughs. So I think this open approach to science, the collaboration that we've been seeing is again driven by the pandemic and COVID has been absolutely fantastic. And of course, that is very much at the heart of what I'm doing. So for obvious reasons, it's an incredibly exciting time to be working in this field. But as, again, the messages coming through in the conference, education, advocacy, awareness is so critical. And because of the sheer pace of change that's happening, and, I spent a lot of my time just trying to get people to open up their ears and minds and break through the sort of the mindsets that unfortunately are the real barriers to progress. And of course, ever more so in policy and government, you really need to find the right ways to get people to listen. So I think a lot of this is about making sure that the arguments are mainstream or actually talked in terms of what will actually drive the impact in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So at the heart of improved health and well-being, of course, is a deep understanding of what can maintain health across the life course, because of course a lot of longevity science is really about health, and this means more than just drugs to target the underlying biology of aging. We need to look at the entire exposome, which is something that I've been fascinated by. That describes all the factors that influence our health and aging trajectory. Our behavior, the environment in which we live. Which enables us to thrive, and of course our lifestyle. So, and of course, let's not forget there's so much that we can do now that will have a dramatic impact on our health span. Walking 20 minutes a day has shown to have a dramatic impact. Many studies, many of which you will know about, that can reduce the risk of death by upwards of 30%. Research by RAND, for example, shows that this simple activity could actually deliver huge economic benefits. They've calculated to the tune of 100 billion per year if we just all of us walk 20 minutes a day. And even if you're inactive, if you start getting active, you can earn an extra 3.2 years of life, according to the RAND research. So why aren't we doing, these most basic things that could have such a dramatic impact on our health? So that's a really fascinating question. I think we really have to understand that. It's simple. It's human behavior. We are very, very different than nematode worms, I'm afraid. Human behavior is complex, and changing our behavior is really, really tough. We need to make it easy to keep healthy and well, and cheap. We need the right environments to make the best choices. The simple fact that it is not cheap or woven into the fabric of our daily lives, our hopes and dreams, it won't happen. We're always looking for the quick fix, the miracle cure, indeed a pill that could cure all ills or even aging itself. So, but we need the hope. And sometimes it's a simple hope that will actually be the quick fix that we need. And I was really struck by a piece in JAMA that Eric Topol had tweeted out a couple of weeks ago that talked about how more than half of all adults, take dietary supplements. We've talked about supplements earlier in the conference today. In 2021, people in the US spent an estimated $50 billion on dietary supplements, and $900 million was spent on advertising these supplements. And we know that most of these supplements don't actually do anything at all. I know there are some really great companies like Novus Labs, who were on earlier, who are trying to really change and produce the evidence that these work. But it just shows you the sheer amount of money that is spent, really, really sort of tapping into the quick fix and people's hopes that by taking something, it will make them feel better and look better. So what I'm saying is that a lot of this is about selling hope. And there's a lot of hype. And I know this is something that comes up a lot in longevity research. And we have to remember that there's no single molecule or drug yet that can outdo the effects of a poor lifestyle or being in the poverty trap. And if you don't eat healthily and you're worried about your finances, you can't sleep, you're stressed. Stress came out a lot in the previous couple of sessions. You risk 10 or more years of your life. So now hope can be a byproduct of taking a pill. And we talked a lot about the placebo effect already today, but a sense of purpose cannot be bought or sold. Now, many of you will know the work by Angus Deakin, the death by despair, the opioid crisis. If you have a loss of hope, or if you despair about your life, this leads to premature mortality. So psychological aging, which was mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm really, really interested in that. And I think that's the unexplored area that is really going to open up some new ways of thinking about longevity research. And my colleagues who I'm working with at the National Innovation Center for Aging, or NICA for short, are exploring ways that we can really increase our societal brain health, and what we call, it's a new term called brain capital, which I'll come on to in a little bit. So we've got psychological age that's been described by some colleagues as your chronological age in a healthy state without mental illness or depression, anxiety, and how do you feel in the context of your life. And in the context of your biological health. And of course, a lot of us who are very active, in improving our health, we're very, very tapped into our own sense of motivations. But this has actually been a subject that's been of high interest to my dear friend and colleague, Alex Zaveronkov, who many of you will know, and of course I interviewed in my book, is the founder of In Silico Medicine and Deep Longevity. And he, with Peter Diamandis, founder of Singularity and X Prize, many of you will know, they published in late 2020 the first AI-powered psychological aging clock to analyze and interpret the psychosocial factors of aging. So this work looks at your state of mind, how your psychological state affects, the aging process. And, it's obvious, we as human beings, we have, attitudes, belief systems, our whole sort of sense about what we want, our sense of purpose. These are very, very intricate and hugely impact how we live our lives. And some of you will know people like Laura Carstensen at Stanford, who's been really involved in the new sort of map of life project. Now, she developed the socio-emotional selectivity theory, or SST, which shows that the perception of time plays a fundamental role in the selection and pursuit of life goals. And that can be manipulated to affect behavior. So applying this theory, going back to Alex and Peter, they developed psychological aging clocks on large data sets and discovered that higher subjective age, that sense of being older, is very predictive of all-cause mortality. People they found, they were predicted to be 5 years or more older than their chronicle age, and they have a much higher chance of dying. So now they also showed that you can manipulate this. So if you take risks, you have a greater openness to risk-taking and your own sort of psychological attitudes to things, that can actually reduce your mortality risk. So this kind of concurs with a lot of science that I've been fascinated by on, for example, a sense of optimism has also been linked to reduced mortality. And being optimistic decreases psychological age. So what I'm saying, and just a recent paper that Alex Zaveronkov just published with colleagues at Harvard are trying to show that is all around enhancing future well-being through AI and working on a follow-up study on the effects of happiness on physiological measures of aging. So the reason why I felt it was really important to talk about this is that it points to the need for solutions that not only work on the biology of aging, but also the psychology of aging. And it also taps into why I think one of the biggest areas that is actually the biggest block to progress in the scientific arena generally is ageism. Ageism keeps on coming up in all the work that I've been doing, all the hats that I've been wearing. And of course, aging stereotypes, they influence actually the aging process itself. And ageism, is something that my colleague Andrew Scott, who wrote The 100-Year Life a few years ago, a very successful book, is a challenge that we really need to face, to really embrace and to develop the sense of the longevity dividend. And many of you will know, and I think the figures, I think Dylan mentioned this figure of 37, I had 38 additional $38 trillion per year is possible with every year of increased healthy life, every year of increased health span. And it just shows that the significance of the longevity dividend if you get this right. But ageism is a real block that we need to tackle. So I think what this points to, and I think is driving a lot of the work that I'm doing in the UK, is that we need solutions that are easy and accessible to everyone, and which gives people hope, a sense of optimism, allows them to develop their sense of purpose, their reason to be alive. So I think this is where, it'll be really interesting to see how all the research in the animal models plays out in the human situation. Because I think, we have to understand, this link between our physiology and our sense of self and our psychological sense of self. And of course, the Japanese will call this the sense of purpose ikigai. And of course, we know that the Japanese they've really sort of have a very, very different view on aging. And of course, they are the oldest society in the world. But they also are one of the blue zone areas, for example, around the world, where they tend to live longer. And that's down to a whole bunch of different reasons. But a sense of purpose, sense of well-being, a sense of family, these are all really, really important factors. So I think these are really, really important to address. And I think frames some of the work that I think is also really important moving forward. When we talk about engaging and collaborating with all the different stakeholders and improving health span, we have to understand that health needs to embrace all the revolutions that we're seeing in other aspects of our lives, like banking, shopping. We're used to convenience and choice. And it's clear that I have a huge interest in AI and data. And in some ways, health data is unlike other data, of course. People have concerns over privacy, over their personal medical records, for example. But our financial data is very, very private too. And yet we share this data, and we've got open banking, for example, in the UK, where we choose to move our data to different banks, very, very easily. So this is opened up a whole kind of fintech ecosystems, and this is what I'm actually looking at in some of the work that I'm doing with the Healthy Longevity Blueprint. Now, we know health data is very, very plentiful. We know we generate a lot of data in our lives. Big tech knows this. This is the gold stuff of biomarker research, of course. And this is why, for example, Alzheimer's research in the UK initiated the Early Detection of Neurodegenerative Diseases Study, or EDON for short, with the Gates Foundation, using digital biomarkers via smartwatches to detect diseases years and years and years before symptoms develop and people even recognize them. So some really interesting developments in the UK, for example. We've got a group called Our Future Health, which is led by Andy Rodham, which is in the process of recruiting 5 million healthy volunteers in the UK as a major health study to predict who will get ill in their later years before they show symptoms. It's geared to be the UK's largest health study, and we're really interested to see what will be uncovered through this research process to really understand new ways to predict and prevent diseases. And of course, the cure for dementia is obviously the holy grail for all of us. Now, we know the private sector is very involved with consumer and tech companies experimenting here. We know, for example, our iPhones, they can monitor your mobility, your sleep patterns, and they may soon be able to detect the early signs of mental health, which of course is a massive scourge, especially coming out of the pandemic. They could be able to detect depression, for example, through patterns of your typing on your phones, and typos, for example. These are all ways in which they can understand your chances of getting depression. So this takes us into a whole new realm, which is also really, really fascinating, really starting to get sort of exploding, which is, this whole field of emotion AI, gauging how people are feeling, how they're, using various data points, facial expressions, and so forth to understand our emotions. Now, the reason I mention this is because there's a lot of really fascinating work taking place, with the National Innovation Centre for Aging I mentioned earlier, in new concepts around, for example, longevity cities, creating environments, using things like emotion AI, sort of sensing people how they're behaving in their environments to see, to be able to look after people in terms of, their responses and their behaviors. Now, we know all stakeholders in health, government, public, private sector, we need to be looking more at prevention rather than the cure. And we know that, and the pandemic has shown us how closely our health is linked to our wealth, and that we need to see health as a societal asset to maximize. We need to invest in and look at the whole system change approach to prevention, and see health as an asset to invest in, not as a cost. Going back to longevity cities, there's one is being trialed in Newcastle, which is in the north of the UK, and is acting as a template for cities around the world, including Milan, Tokyo, Barcelona, Hamilton in Canada. And really, it's based on two key principles. One is that a shared sense of prosperity and well-being is based, it needs to involve engaging with citizens across the life course of all ages, taking a very intergenerational approach. And we really need to see this not just focused on old age, but really seeing healthy aging and healthy longevity is something that we have to see as a cross lives from zero to death. And we need to create environments which make it easy for people to follow healthier lifestyles well before old age. You know, this speaks to infrastructure, policies like active transport, and, you know, really looking at, this has been mentioned earlier in some of the other panel discussions, the social determinants of our health, which is 80% of the determinants of our health. So looking ahead, we've got a new group. I know DARPA was mentioned in some of the sessions earlier. We've got a new group in the UK called ARIA, which is the Advanced Research Invention Agency. And I'm working with my colleagues at NICA to develop a healthy longevity innovation mission. So kind of like a moonshot, and see this as one of the core innovation missions that the government post-Brexit are looking to develop and really to sort of seize the ambition for the UK to become a science and tech superpower. So, you know, when you have ideas around, you know, using the longevity cities templates as part of a living labs approach, which is being trialed in the energy sector, becoming, you know, a real world sort of test bed for testing out new products and services being tested out by real citizens in place-based in communities. And really looking at outcomes data to show how better environments, you know, lead to better health outcomes. And I mentioned that North Star of increasing healthy life expectancy or minimizing health inequalities. That's been something, again, it's part of our policy agenda. And one of the things that we're looking at through a social venture called Business for Health, which was one of the ideas that came out of the incubator of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Longevity, is really looking at how business can be incentivized through measurement on their contribution to health in three key areas, which is workforce health, consumer health through products and services, and community health. And essentially, we're developing a framework and an index with the Confederation of Business Industry to measure the contribution of the business world and aligning that with the National Office for Statistics Health Index, which is in development, and really seeing how the business community can be part of that system change approach so that we can reduce demand on our NHS and care system. And some of the stats there from the CBI, they estimate that, for example, musculoskeletal and depression, if the business community did more, for example, in workforce health, we could reduce demand on our NHS and care systems by 10 to 20%. Now, that sort of economics and those sorts of figures are what will really galvanize the policy world to take note. And so this is really the approaches that we're taking. So our big idea, really, in the same way that we've seen in climate, is to take health into ESG investments. So just like what we're seeing in energy, you know, investing in clean energy, net zero, we want to do the same in health. We want companies that are harming our health, and of course, food companies, ultra high processed food is one big area that we're looking at. We eat far too much junk food. We want to disincentivize investment in those industries that are harming health. Housing is another big area. So these are the sorts of things that we want to be tackling to really look at what are the areas that we can really impact that are going to really deliver on this healthy life expectancy. And of course, funding aging research is a key part of that, but it's not the only part of that. So I guess closing, we think, you know, with the work and the vision actually of the UK government that they have had for some time now, the moment and the time will soon come. We've got a new Prime Minister who will be announced on the 5th of September. We're gearing up with our Healthy Longevity Innovation Mission. We hope this will be the next moonshot, really to look at harnessing those developments in longevity science and data innovation to capture deep insights into all of our life data, you know, coming from genetics, behavioral data, environmental data, financial data, and really encourage, and I think this is a big prize, is to encourage citizens to share their data. So we're looking at new data models. Again, post-Brexit, we're looking at agile regulatory reform on data, incentives to share data, for public benefit while also incentivizing, you know, commercial enterprise. So we think there's a win-win by getting this right. And these are the sorts of ideas that we're putting together in this innovation mission, which we'll be talking more about in the next couple of months during Longevity Week in November. So, you know, wish us luck. But I think the potential is so colossal and so significant to really deliver on this government goal of increasing healthy life expectancy while minimizing health and well-being inequalities. I'm afraid systemic inequalities are really, really important, and of course are very much at the heart of a lot of policy decision-making at the moment in the UK context.